When I debuted this series upwards of about 20-something days ago, it was called 28 to describe the 28 days before the presidential and Senate elections. But the big question as we sit here today is, will we have election results on election night? How many days thereafter will we have to wait for those election results? And what does this mean for your financial relief, your second stimulus checks, your second stimulus package? And what are the latest results this morning as we go into Sunday afternoon? It's good news. I'm here, you're here, and this is 28. Hey, good morning, everybody. It's 28, our regular series on the tail end of early mornings and mornings LALATE that details the final 28 days before the presidential election. Tuesday is election night, and by all accounts, you should normally have a president revealed on election night, but this may not be that year. If you've not yet already, go to the Friends channel, subscribe, because it's the best community that's out there. Subscribing makes you part of the community that's pushing to get you the relief that you need, part of the second stimulus and eventually the third stimulus package, and also like this video. In this video, I'm going to be going over what the polls say today, what you should expect for Tuesday, what you should expect for Wednesday, and why you need to remain vigilant and attentive to the events of Tuesday night. All right, let's get to the breaking news. The breaking news as we sit here today is that the presidential polls and the Senate polls are very different going into Tuesday. As we sit here, just the final days before the presidential election, and you're waiting for your second stimulus check, your second stimulus package, your third stimulus check, and your third stimulus package, the question is when, how, by whom, and where. A lot of big developments, and let's get to them. First, executive orders. I've gotten this question here and there in recent days, but I think it's a big question that needs to be answered right off the bat. So let's do it. Can the president do executive orders down to election night? Yes. He can, the night before you go to vote in the polls, he can say, I'm doing an executive order for second stimulus checks. I'm using that $800 billion of CARES Act 1 money that's sitting in PPP. I'm going to send out the stimulus checks. You'll have them in 10 days after election night. You will get them in your hand. You'll get $4,000 for all adults, and I'm going to give $200 billion of it to dedicate for another round of FPUC, that enhanced unemployment benefits that go on top of PUA and UI, and it will be coming to you shortly in the weeks to come. He can do it. He has the constitutional authority. It's not in his hands. It's outside of the hands of Congress. It's outside the hands of Treasury. It's in PPP money. The question is, will he do it? Many of the viewers have asked, why hasn't he done it? Well, with days before the election night, it's not quite clear what this president is focusing on. New polls out today suggest that the race is not getting tighter, but now getting wider. Upwards of 2 weeks ago, I was reporting that the race was a 7-point spread. Then it was an 8-point spread. Now new reports indicate today a Wall Street Journal poll says it's a 10-point spread, that the race is not even close between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. That's on national numbers. Then swing states. The number of swing states are unchanged. Donald Trump is holding in only 2 at most of the swing states. Not a single poll has showed him leading in more than 2 swing states, and several polls show him in not leading in any of the swing states. Remember, he has to dominate the swing states. Any candidate has to dominate the swing states, the majority of them, to capture 270, the road to presidency. So with that and the understanding of the executive orders, can the president do executive orders after election night? Yes, he can. Can he do the executive orders in any time in the month of November? Yes. December? Yes. How long can we wait? How long can he still do executive orders? Then you get into the issues of constitutionality. It may become a contested race. The loser may contest the race. All accounts suggest that the loser of the presidential race will contest it and will be in court. There are already court battles already ensuing about balloting, returning the ballots, how the ballots are being counted, all polling places, hours of polling places. Every single thing you could argue about is being argued in almost every state that's possible to argue them. And those debates are going to go up and up and up until ultimately some of them arrive potentially in the Supreme Court. So will we have a president sworn in on Inauguration Day? We don't know yet. But all the way up to Inauguration Day, executive orders can be issued for your stimulus relief. All right, got that done. Let's go to the remainder of the big issues, which are, okay, so let's say the polls are correct. I know sometimes polls are incorrect, but let's say polls are correct and Joe Biden is your new president. Does that change your stimulus? Well, no, but it does impact the sort of narrative. Let me explain. There are some accounts that I would fully expect that if the president concedes a defeat, which we don't know he will, concedes a defeat, he may not want to do much of anything. He may not want to do executive orders, and he may not want to sign off any stimulus bill that is coming across his table as a lame duck president until Joe Biden comes into office. There's that concern. Then when we focus on the Senate, there is actually a bigger whammy of confusion there. Boy, in the Senate, the races are just unclear. We simply don't know. Alaska, they say they can't even poll. They can't even figure out the terrain. There's too many independents run. There's too many independent voters. They have no idea what's happening in Alaska. Georgia, 2 Senate races, and boy, both of them have to get at least 50% or then they go to a runoff election. Yes, another election, and that would be in January 5th. Pennsylvania, under fire, again today, doing what it's always done, but now becoming in the part of the national spotlight because of what it does. And what does it do? It doesn't vote, it doesn't count ballots that are mail-in until the day after. And then military ballots, it doesn't calculate till days after. And Pennsylvania is a battleground state. It's a swing state that both candidates are stopping regularly on. So you see this uncertainty. Well, how about the Republicans in the Senate? Those races are too close to call. Texas, Florida, I can give you example after example where even the pundits, whether they are a Democratic pundit or a Republican pundit, whether it's a Republican news channel or a Democratic news channel, they can't call these races. They're too close to call. And so ultimately, if the races are too close to call, what will happen on election night? Well, you will either see a broad margin of victory or a narrow margin of victory. And if it's a narrow margin of victory, we have more confusion. Ultimately, viewers may ask me, okay, what happens if we have a broad margin of victory and the Democrats win the Senate by a big margin? What happens if the Republicans win it by a big margin? What happens if it's a narrow margin? Let's just say there's too many permutations to go through. The bottom line is that I'm going to be modifying the coverage programming shows on this channel going into election night because I expect a big free-for-all of confusion of just this and that. It may just be just too much to do in 3 or 4 videos a day. Then maybe we have to have 6 or 7 or 8 videos to really break it down because it's literally going to be all over the place. What's important to understand is your stimulus is passed by the Senate, and you need to know who's winning the Senate. You need to know who it will be the next party in control of the Senate come January 2021. And when will we know that? I don't know that either. You don't know that, I don't know that, and no one knows that. Let's just get that very clear. That while we can see there's a 10-point spread in the presidential race, in the Senate race, we just don't know. We don't know, and we don't know when we'll know. You got that? Okay, I'm glad you got that. With that, that could impact your ability to see her way or the highway, because ultimately it may be her way or the highway if the Democrats win by a big majority, but if they don't, then it may be the highway for her, because then it's time to negotiate in good faith and not take it or leave it, which has been much the case for months. Uh, Poll numbers across the board are released today suggest disfavoring the president's handling of COVID. And the question is whether polls will change in these final 2 days of the election, before the election night. Here's what you should expect. You should fully expect on Monday or Tuesday the stock market to be volatile, and a volatile stock market doesn't sit well for voters. Second, you should expect more COVID-19 news cases. We're going to 100,000. We could go to 110,000 tomorrow. This, again, does not sit well for the president. So all these things are sort of piling up at the same time. Dwarfed. It's the dwarf, not morph. Dwarfed among all this was two economic great news last week, the new GDP numbers and the new unemployment numbers, but those were dwarfed by concerns that ultimately the big concern is, will we get second stimulus? Because without second stimulus, we're not going to get through this. When we sit here, we need to focus on the path of stimulus. And ultimately, we're not seeing a lot of explanation. In even the last final days before this election, one, we're not hearing from the president on executive orders. Two, we're not hearing from Joe Biden on whether he would do executive orders, because there's an urgency if he came into office that he could do executive orders very quickly, because act of Congress could take weeks and we can't wait around for weeks. Third, there's no clarity from either party of whether they would do something during this lame duck period, potentially from October to December. We just don't know. November, December. We don't know. They're not telling us. Next, we're not getting clarity about bills. So we have no clarity about whether the president would introduce a Republican bill. He has never introduced a Republican bill. He's always had Mitch introduce bills. And whether that would get introduced by the Senate after election night that would mirror what Steve Mnuchin has wanted. Two, we've had no clarity from the Democrats whether they would introduce a third stimulus bill, or the Republicans whether they introduce a third stimulus bill. And so basically what you have is a lot of people doing much of nothing. Much of nothing. And what's important to understand is that you need stimulus from where we left off in May all the way up to now. That's second stimulus. That's stimulus checks, FPUC, hazard pay, enhanced unemployment benefits, testing and tracing, schools, mortgage, eviction, rent, all those types of things you need the relief for. And under the second stimulus package, those things expire in December. So guess what? Then you need a third stimulus package. The third stimulus package would kick in January and go to arguably the spring, and may get us through the finality of this pandemic, presuming that the vaccines and the therapeutics are in full disbursement of the American population by the spring of this year. So the third stimulus package would be more stimulus checks, more FPUC, more hazard pay, some hazard pay because we haven't seen it yet, more rent, more eviction, more mortgage forbearance, and all those type of things. But no one's writing the bill. No one has written the bill. So as you sit here, just as like, where's the bill? I mean, come on now, let's get this bill going. And as with that, there's renewed focus to say, let's get it going, Congress, get it going, or get going yourself. In the final days before this election, Purple Power, the followers of this channel, need to continue the push with executive orders, push with seats for stimulus, push with the narrative that we need MSC, we need multiple stimulus checks. The VP nominee has not talked about her own bill since she has been tapped as a VP nominee, which is really quite confusing. Remember, her bill is the $2,000 every month for 6 months, or until the pandemic improves, or until unemployment rates go down. Has not talked about her own bill. So then what? Does it mean she doesn't like it anymore? What? Or are you just sort of waiting to get elected and then you will give us that bill? I'm just really not clear. In the closing days of the election, Biden has taken a 10% 10-point lead over Trump, garnering 52% of registered voters nationally versus 42% for Trump, says a new report today. The Wall Street Journal reports the poll finds a majority of voters, 52%, disapprove of Trump's performance so far, and that includes stimulus, while 45% approve. So it's almost 50-50. 55% approve of how the president has handled the economy, but 57% disapprove of his handling of the pandemic, while only 40% approve. Biden's advantages are among black voters. Biden has 87 to 5% for Trump. Let me say that again. Biden's key advantages are among black voters. Biden has 87%. Voters 18 to 34, Biden has 60%. Seniors, Biden has 58%. Women, 57%. Whites with college degrees, 56%. And independents, 51%. Again, this is based upon the poll that had only 1,000 registered voters, half of which reached by phone in a poll taken October 29th to October 30th with a margin of error of 3 percentage points. So there you go. 92 million Americans have already cast their ballots going into election night, as I've detailed on this channel and other people have said as well, is that Republicans tend to vote on election night in the polling precinct, whereas Democrats tend to poll by mail. It's just sort of where they are. And so the question is, if the president wants to get people to vote for him, will he do an October surprise? There has been no October surprise. We've been waiting for that stimulus executive order as the October surprise. Haven't seen it. The question is, will it, and when will it come? We're going to stay focused and we're going to stay motivated. Go to the Finance Channel, subscribe, because we're going to get through this pandemic together and we're going to get our feet on the floor and get moving. Also, like this video. Coming up next is Afternoons LALATE. As always, stay informed, stay smiling, and stay at LA for more.